What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Bretto. Today, we're here to discuss the defensive side of the ball for the Green Bay Packers, specifically one area that is really getting picked apart these last few games, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Seattle Seahawks try to replicate that success against Green Bay on Sunday night. But first, before we dive into what that is, you know the drill. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. You can find all my work over at ESPNlacrosse.com, including the article version of what we're going to discuss here today. And for my Wisconsin sports radio fans out there, Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, whatever you need, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app. You can find me on Sports Lead Monday through Friday, 3 to 6, multiple days per week. So like I said, there's a particular part of this Green Bay Packers defense that these last couple games, Miami, Detroit specifically, are really picking apart, and it's their pass defense specifically over the middle of the field. So a few weeks ago against the Dolphins, Tua overall would finish the game 37 of 46 for 365 passing yards. 28 of those completions came between the numbers, and these numbers are from Pro Football Focus, and 300 of those passing yards. Following week, Jared Goff was 32 of 41 overall for 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. 214 of those passing yards came between the numbers, with 23 of those completions and all 3 of those touchdowns. And asking Isaiah McDuffie, when it comes to defending the middle of the field, obviously there's a lot of space there to navigate, right? Especially for the linebacker position, and just some of the intricacies of it that he highlighted that are important to defending that part of the field is getting the proper amount of depth. So again, you're trying to take away some of those intermediate throws, identifying quickly, is it a run, is it a pass, so you can position yourself correctly, again, based on what the play call is, and then doing your best to minimize the passing lane windows that are available to the quarterback, and either taking them away completely or trying to shrink them. So again, that's a very 30,000 foot view of, again, what's going through the linebacker position and what they're trying to identify, places they're trying to get to on those over the middle of the field targets. Now, as always, there's context to these numbers, right? Like, let's look at the Miami game. The Packers were up 24-3. They dominated the first half, and in that second half, like just about any defense would, you go into a bit more protection mode, right? You're just trying not to give up that big play over the top. You're okay with them taking some 8, 10, 15-yard gains, whatever it might be, on the underneath routes, forcing them to burn the clock, put together long scoring drives. So a lot of Tua's yards did come in that second half when, again, there's a different defensive approach at that point. So again, there's context to these numbers. Now, having said that, it's also not only on the linebackers. And we're going to discuss the linebacker position here and its role in the struggles that the Packers have had in the passing game over the middle of the field. But again, there's other elements to this. One, the screen game. The Dolphins, the Detroit Lions had a ton of success on screens against this Green Bay Packers team. And Detroit specifically, it wasn't just the screens, but when the screens were dialed up, that did a ton of damage against this Packers defense. 4-man rush, struggling to get consistent pressure on Jared Goff. Packers when they did find themselves in those second and long, particularly third and long situations, and Jeff Hafley sees an opportunity to say, hey, let's get off the field here. Again, that's one big difference between last year's defense and this year's defense. You can have the offense in a third and long, and instead of the, all right, let's keep it in front of us approach, it's, hey, we got an opportunity to get off the field. Let's do everything we can to get off the field. So we're seeing a lot of third down blitzes, pressures that have been dialed up by Jeff Hafley. And I think that got magnified in that Lions game, again, because the pass rush the 4-man rush specifically, was so inconsistent. So it's third and long. You have the opportunity to get off the field. If you're the Packers defense, Jeff Hafley sent pressures like he's done all season on third downs. But oftentimes it was met by a screen that Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, had dialed up. And so now, if you're the Packers and you're pressuring in that situation, you're at a major disadvantage from a number standpoint, right? Because if you send someone, say you send a linebacker, you're now down someone at the second level Your defensive front plus that linebacker or whoever you're sending on pressure are now out of position, again, because it's a screen. And the Lions were able to capitalize on those plays in those specific situations. So it wasn't just that the Lions were dialing up screens. It's when they were dialing those screens up that really burned this Packers defense. And Hafley had talked about this. It's not just the Packers. There are a lot of defenses that are struggling around the NFL right now to defend screens. Hafley had mentioned that him and LaFleur, and I believe this is common practice around the NFL, they get tape of all the games that took place over the week, specifically the big plays that were generated, to see, hey, is there anything that from a defensive perspective we need to be mindful of and watching out for? From an offensive perspective, if you're Matt LaFleur, hey, is there something that another team did that we could steal and incorporate into our playbook that worked in recent weeks? And Hafley said this past week, a lot of those big plays that they were watching from around the NFL were on screen plays. So right now the screen is very much in vogue, so to speak, in terms of the offense's ability to pick up chunk plays, and defenses are struggling to defend it. I mean, it is, if properly executed and your linemen get into the correct positions, it's a difficult play to defend, again, because you have blockers downfield. It's mismatches. You have offensive linemen on members of the secondary, on linebackers. So you're getting your ball carrier, a dynamic presence, the ball in space, where they can make defenders miss. They're already in an advantageous situation. So you can see why screen game in particular is picking up steam around the NFL. And until the Packers, other defenses have a consistent remedy to stop it, you have to think it's going to continue, and the Packers are going to continue to see opponents try to attack them in that capacity. So again, context to all this is important, and it's not only the Packers who are struggling with the screen game. Another element to this, again, something Hafley talked about, is the cat and mouse game, right, between the offense and the defense trying to disguise where their zones are going to be, right, where those spaces within their defense are going to be located, and the offense, again, is trying to decipher pre-snap and as the play unfolds where those openings are going to be so they can attack them. And the Lions game specifically, Jared Goff, again, Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator, they did an excellent job of finding those soft spots within the Packers defense. And I think it was a video last week where I talked about how the defense, the players, are getting more comfortable as with each week that passes with their responsibilities within Jeff Hafley's scheme, what their role is, seeing different looks from opposing offenses while they're handling their specific responsibilities, right? Because if you can know what your responsibility is and be confident in it, but if the offense throws a play at you, a look at you that you haven't seen before, how are you going to react in that moment, right? So as more reps get banked, as the Packers defense sees more looks, they're becoming more comfortable with the variety of things that offense can throw at them within the scope of what their individual responsibility is on a given play. We are seeing progress from the Packers defenders in that regard. Now, I say all that to say this. Jeff Hafley's a first-year defensive coordinator at the NFL level. There's still a learning curve that he's navigating, right? In terms of how he makes the adjustments, how quickly he makes the adjustments, the type of adjustments he makes. And just like a defensive player, right? You know what the play is. You know how you have to go out and execute it within the scope of what the defense is trying to accomplish. But like we just talked about, if the offense throws something different at you that you weren't expecting, you now have to respond in the moment within the scope of what your defensive responsibility is, but making sure that those passing windows are closed or you're filling the correct running lane, whatever it might be. There's a similar connection for Hafley as the coordinator, as the defensive play caller, as the game's unfolding, and he's being put into new, different positions than what he's prepared for, what he's seen over the previous weeks. So I think that's a part of this as well, right? So when we see, again, the Lions offense, Jared Goff, Ben Johnson, going to be the most coveted head coaching candidate this coming offseason, and makes just about every defense out there look silly. When we're seeing that offense, again, which isn't uncommon, they've been doing this all year, the Lions have, when we're seeing them have success in finding those soft spots over the middle, identifying where the Packers defenders are going to be within their respective zones and dialing up plays to combat that. Again, Lions have been doing that all year, but I think part of that equation is there's still a learning process that's unfolding for Jeff Hafley as a first-time defensive coordinator, play caller, making those adjustments, establishing the game plan again, going up against Ben Johnson, who's best offensive assistant in the game right now. So the screen game, that cat and mouse game between the offense and the defense in terms of where's the zones, where's the soft spots, how are we disguising it, how are we going to defend it, all parts of this equation not only falls on the linebacker's shoulders, right? Because we can see them getting attacked over the middle. We saw against the Lions, especially as they got closer to the goal line, going after Isaiah McDuffie, Eric Wilson. And again, they're a part of that equation. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But there's other factors in play as well, other areas that this Green Bay Packers defense has to improve upon if they're going to limit opponents over the middle of the field. All right, now let's talk about the linebacker position. And this has been a really, really difficult stretch of games given the opponents for the Packers not to have Edgerrin Cooper available. Because of his speed, because of his athleticism, just that added coverage ability that he brings to the linebacker position against teams like San Francisco, Miami, Detroit, who, again, Miami and Detroit specifically, who very, very much attack the middle of the field, who do an excellent job pre-snap with motion or misdirection at the snap, a lot of eye candy to get the linebackers looking in a different direction, to get them leaning that half step or taking a step in the wrong direction, because that's all it takes in the NFL for a passing lane to open, for a running lane to open up, and a big play to follow after that. So these last few opponents in particular are some of the better units in the NFL at really stressing the linebacker position. And so I think we really saw how much this defense missed having Edgerrin Cooper in the middle of it. And now Cooper's a rookie. He's adjusting to the NFL game. There's still absolutely a learning curve that he's navigating. There's still absolutely ups and downs that we see from him throughout the course of the game. But it's also telling his playing time prior to the injury continued to increase each week, while Isaiah McDuffie's continued to trend downward. He brings, again, a coverage ability to the linebacker position. He has that 4.51 speed. He can just cover more ground. He can help those windows that we talked about being open earlier, knowing where they are. He can close them quicker, again, because of that speed, because of that athleticism that he has. And we've seen the playmaking ability that he brings to the table. But from a game planning perspective, if you're Jeff Hafley, there's added flexibility because the speed that Cooper has gives him versatility, right? If you're Jeff Hafley and you're putting the game plan together and you have Edgerrin Cooper available, again, that gives you more flexibility because you can dial up some different calls for him, knowing that he can cover a lot of ground, knowing that you can put him in a variety of situations, again, because of that speed, because of that athleticism that he has. There's also a trickle-down effect to that of Cooper being on the field and what the potential responsibilities are of the safety position. Following that Jacksonville game, Xavier McKinney alluded to this, that Cooper, again, that speed, that athleticism I keep referencing, that alters at times what the Packers ask of the safety position. Because if you have a linebacker who can cover, a good amount of ground, you can ask him to do more things. That then frees up the safety position to handle different responsibilities, right? To cover different parts of the field. Because, Cooper's range is so broad. So again, it's not only what Cooper does individually, but it's how he fits into this defense, and then the ripple effect of him being out there that impacts the rest of the unit. Now, without Cooper available, Packers have relied really, really heavily on Isaiah McDuffie, and he's been targeted often over these last two games. According to Pro Football Focus, just in these last two games, McDuffie has been targeted 23 times in two games. He's allowed 20 receptions for 209 yards and has one pass breakup. He's a run defender. That is what Isaiah McDuffie's strength is, and he's a very, very sound run defender. Sideline to sideline speed, fight through blocks, take on blocks, fill gaps, sound tackler. Like, that's a role that suits him well. And I wrote about this before the 49ers game when we first learned that the Packers were going to be without Edgerrin Cooper. I thought there was going to be a platoon at the linebacker position when the Packers were in nickel. We know Quay Walker's going to be out there, but I thought in more obvious running situations, right? So 1st and 10, 2nd and 4, where there's probably a higher probability that the offense is going to run the ball. I thought in those situations we would see McDuffie next to Quay Walker, again, leveraging what his strength is. On the flip side, on more of those obvious passing downs, again, 2nd and 8, 3rd and 10, I thought we would see Eric Wilson on the field next to Quay Walker because, again, the coverage aspect is more fits within Wilson's wheelhouse. So that's what I expected going into the stretch of games, but that hasn't really been the case. For the most part, it's been Isaiah McDuffie who's been dominating those defensive snaps. And again, it's not only on the linebacker position. The pass rush can do a better job at getting after the quarterback. The screen game, I mean, the linebackers have to play a really, really important role because it's their job to try to make sure that the ball carrier stays in the middle of the field. That way the defensive line, who the ball's now passed, can retrace and get back upfield to hopefully make a tackle. So again, linebackers are part of the equation, but for a lot of the reasons we discussed earlier on, they're not the only part of these struggles that the Packers are having in their over-the-middle pass defense. And one potential area to help Green Bay in that regard is with Xavier McKinney and potentially playing him closer to the line of scrimmage to basically provide reinforcements for the linebackers in that middle of the field area. Now, the challenge with that in this game upcoming is the Packers are going to be shorthanded in the secondary. We know they're going to be without Jair Alexander on Sunday, and they're going to be without Javon Bullard. So that's a lot of movement at the cornerback position. Presumably, Keyshawn Nixon's now going to play in the slot, and you're now relying on Eric Stokes and Carrington Valentine to be your boundary cornerbacks against what's been a potent Seattle passing attack that includes DK Metcalf, who has been targeted downfield on passes of 20 or more yards, the most in football. The Seahawks will try to push the ball downfield on you, something Jeff Hafley talked about this week. So there's, again, that cat and mouse, that give and take. If you're going to utilize Xavier McKinney closer to the line of scrimmage because you want to provide some reinforcements over the middle for your linebackers, well, again, give and take, you're going to be shorthanded on the back end, right? Against an offense that will push the ball downfield and at a cornerback position for the Packers where you're relying on Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes to be your boundary cornerbacks this week. So if Jair Alexander had been able to play, again, I talked about this in the last video. We know what he can do on his own as a cornerback. I think his completion percentage when targeted this season is 56%. His quarterback passer rating is around the 79 mark. I mean, we know the caliber of player he can be when he's on the field. But there's a trickle-down effect, kind of like we talked about with Edgerrin Cooper, to how his presence then frees up other players to go to take on larger responsibilities or go fill different roles, right? Like if Jair Alexander's out there, you have a little bit more flexibility with Xavier McKinney because you know that part of the field with Jair is in good hands. So now it gives you more flexibility with McKinney to say, hey, let's go put him up closer to the line of scrimmage in some of these situations. So I think that's going to be, I don't know that the Packers are going to have that ability this week. And again, it might fall more so on the linebackers and Jeff Hafley's game plan scheme, making the proper adjustments to limit the Seattle passing game over the middle on those short to intermediate routes. Because again, this is another offense with Geno Smith that they're going to test you at all levels of the field, right? But Geno will go at the middle of the field, specifically those short to intermediate routes as well. He has 406 pass attempts this season. 207 have come between the numbers. Again, these numbers are from Pro Football Focus. Of those 207 pass attempts that have gone over the middle between the numbers, 155 of them have come within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. So That's right where the linebackers are, right? And we're going to see JSN out of the slot for Seattle matched up against Keyshawn Nixon. He's approaching the 1,000-yard mark this season as a receiver, has 99 targets on the year. He's going to be targeted heavily in this game. Seattle does a great job of getting their running backs involved in the passing game. And I know Kenneth Walker is doubtful for Sunday's game, but they still got Zach Charbonnet. And the running back position in the passing game, that's a key element within their offense. I mean, coming into this game, their running back duo has over 80 targets in the passing game. They rank 4th and 5th on the team in targets. Like, they're a big part of what Seattle wants to do when it comes to moving the ball through the air. And again, it's going to be the screen game. It's going to be over the middle, and it's going to stress those linebackers. Now, good news for the Packers. They do have Edgerrin Cooper. Matt LaFleur said on Friday he is returning to action this week, so that should hopefully provide the middle of the field pass defense with a boost again, just because of the speed, athleticism, presence that he provides. But this is a copycat league, right? If something's working, opponents, offense, defense, regardless of what it is, they're going to continue to leverage that, right? So the Seattle Seahawks are watching the Packers film. They're seeing especially the last few weeks, but it's been a season-long, maybe issue is a little too strong of a word, but it's been something that's been persistent over the course of the season, is opponents finding success against Green Bay over the middle. So Seattle's watching this. They're seeing this. They're seeing how opponents are attacking Green Bay. They're probably going to dial that up, right? Because it's working. And it's going to continue to be something that this Green Bay Packers defense sees until they can consistently prove that they're able to stop it. All right, my friends, if you made it this far in the video, you might as well hit like, you might as well hit subscribe on the channel. I do greatly appreciate it. Hoping to be back with one more video before kickoff on Sunday night, discussing the offensive side of the ball, specifically the offensive line. But I appreciate you tuning in. Like I said, hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Find me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com. And my Wisconsin Sports Radio fans, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app. So until next time, friends, take care.